racial discrimination. As a necessary step to outlaw this prevalent form of discrimination, I filed House Bill 392 this session, the Texas Crown Act. The Crown Act stands for creating a respectful and open world for our natural hair. House Bill 392 prohibits hair discrimination in education, in employment, and in the housing setting. The fundamental right to show up as your authentic self must be protected. Fearing consequences of going to work or at school with your natural hair simply shouldn't occur. Worrying if you'll be fired or suspended because of wearing a protective style that preserves the health of your hair have to come to an end. Imagine living life believing you must use harmful chemicals or other painful techniques to conform to a standard of beauty that isn't your own. Now imagine being a child missing valuable instruction time or being told you cannot participate in your graduation ceremony because of your hair. This is precisely what happens too often. It's also why I decided to work to outlaw it. I am proud to have bipartisan support. I have 4 joint authors and about 40 co-authors of my colleagues in the Texas House that I can count on for support for House Bill 392. And now I'd like to introduce the Honorable Aisha Davis, who's with the State Board of Education. She's worked tirelessly on the ground, has been sort of our right hand in doing things, and have been bringing people together. A few other people I'd like to share that are here. You'll hear from Hope Cozart shortly about her son and some things that happen with them, but you'll also see here we have Aisha Davis, and thank you for sharing your story of the traumatic experience you've experienced on the workplace. One thing that I must share is that in this year and a half, many cases have come forward. People have come forward from everywhere. These are conversations that most times are had at the kitchen table. They're had in our beauty salons. They're had in the barbershops, but they were not spoken in public. And so it is an honor, knowing even my own personal journey with my hair, that I carried this legislation. I often say that I got my hair relaxed with the perm when I was 8 years old. And so that is the only way I knew how to groom my hair. And that was putting harsh chemicals on my hair. But I am now completely natural, and it is a proud moment. I think my hair is more beautiful now than it was when it was relaxed. Last session, I was truly fried. I wasn't dyed, but I was fried. And I think it is the best presentation of myself because it is, as I said before, my true authenticity. So, Aisha, if you will, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Aisha Davis, and I'm a member of the Texas State Board of Education. I represent District 13, which is Dallas and Tarrant counties. I first want to thank you, Representative Bowers, for being courageous enough to bring this legislation before the House. It's so important that we do each and everything we can to protect students and make sure they have the opportunity to be in a classroom learning. And thank you, Representative Reynolds, and everybody else who signed on to support this bill to make sure that our students can stay in the classroom. Before I ran for the State Board of Education, I was a teacher. I was a science teacher, and I loved it. I taught high school science. And we did something exciting each and every day to prepare my students for STEM. So if you miss one day out of my class, you miss something very valuable. If you miss 2 days out of my class, you miss something that's going to really prepare you for the future. So we have students who are coming to school who are excited to learn and who are ready, but they're being put in in-school suspension because of their hair. So they don't get to come to my class and see the amazing things we're going to do in physics today. They don't get to learn all the new things about biology. They have to sit in a room by themselves and do a worksheet. How is that improving outcomes for our students? How is that telling our students we care about their education? We want to make sure that they can do whatever they want to do when they grow up. The Crown Act is a piece of legislation that's going to protect our students and make sure they stay right in that classroom. It's one of the most important bills in education this legislative session. We started this work well over a year ago because a 5-year-old, a kindergartner, was placed in ISS because his hair grew long. So his very, very first image of school will be sitting in a room all by himself simply because of his hair. And he loves his hair, so he doesn't understand why he's being punished. And to be honest, I don't understand it either. Students of African descent in Texas are over-disciplined and underserved. So the least we can do is not discriminate against them because of their hair. None of these students were disciplined for a lot of other things. They didn't have these rich histories where they were all over the hallway, none. They were disciplined simply because of their hair. Understanding why we wear all of these different styles, these locks and these twists, you have to understand why we celebrate our culture and why we're so proud of all these kinks in our hair. And how sometimes we let it rest, but when we let this hair rest, it grows. It grows long. And you can't stop that. That's just the way our hair does. So again, I thank you so much, Representative Bowers. And I thank you for the courage to come and bring this piece of legislation together. We all can work together to protect those kids and make sure every single student gets that opportunity to improve their outcome. So again, thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Boyce, for bringing us all together today. Thank you all so much for standing up for our kids. Next, I would love for you to hear from Hope Cozart, the mother of a student who is currently going through this same situation.
Good morning, I'm Hope Cozart. I'm here to express from a parent's perspective as to why the Crown Act is so important. My son Maddox was put in school suspension for 11 days, all because of his hairstyle. 11 days of being pulled out of class and away from his peers. 11 days of being examined by multiple educators and deemed inappropriate to attend class with his peers. I even tried different hairstyles to appease them with little to no luck. In the past month, we've only had one hairstyle approved, and it was because, I quote, "it laid down." As of yesterday, my son was given lunch detention all because his hair wasn't laid down. We are currently still working towards change at our school and its outdated dress code, but we all know how reluctant Texas can be to change. But this is a good change and will help prevent any other families to be put through what my family and I are currently experiencing. Our children should go to school to learn, not be judged by the adults we entrust them with. Thank you for your time.
Can you spell your name for us?
Hope, H-O-P-E, Cozart, C-O-Z-A-R-T.
Thank you. Thank you, Hope, and thank you, Maddox, for your strength and your courage. I also would like to recognize State Representative Jasmine Crockett, who is one of our co-authors on this piece of legislation. I want to mention Representative Reynolds has been mentioned as a joint author, but we also have Representative Carl Sherman, Representative Tony Rose, and Representative Brad Buckley as joint authors. Representative Crockett, do you have anything to add? And if you will,
Thank you so much for being here. I am the lowly freshman, and you know what? I came to Austin with this audacious idea that I was going to bring about change, especially for those in the African American community. My district is a majority minority district, and so representing that type of district and seeing these types of discrimination, frankly, is what I would sit down here to fight. You know, people are thinking of civil rights right now and they think of police brutality, but the reality is that everything that you've heard this morning outlines why we need more fighters in this system, not just on the outside fighting in, but we need people on the inside, because this is a civil rights issue. We're talking about children that don't have the right to get an education, all because of the way that their hair grows. That doesn't make sense. And what's even more frustrating is that this piece of legislation was filed early on in the session, and it was filed by a number of members, yet we've yet to have a hearing on it. It's really not acceptable, to be perfectly honest, especially in a state that has more African Americans than any other state. This is a crisis that we need to address. We all know that we're dealing with the educational disparities when it comes to the minority community pre-COVID. Those things have only been exacerbated in the midst of COVID, and now these children are having to deal with this. It's time for us to get this right. It's time for us to do what's right. It's time for us to realize that all Texans should be allowed to be who they are in their natural state. And with that, I'm going to have Dakari.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Troy Davis, and I want to thank Ms. Bowers for everything you're doing. It takes a lot of courage to be successful, and it is a shame that we need this type of legislation just to coexist, to get an education, to work in a professional setting, to be viewed as professional, that we have to subject ourselves to European standards of beauty. And I think that it is truly unfortunate and unacceptable. And that's something that we have to stand up against. And sharing our stories and being rooted, standing together, and really on a broader scale, this legislation really needs to pass here in Texas. And it's far too late. Too many instances are happening again and again, and you're seeing them in the media. A lot of things that you don't see is the professional people in the workforce. Out of fear and retaliation, a lot of people don't come out and share their stories. I'm here to tell you I'm a black police officer here in Texas, and I know the struggle. I know the fight. When you're in school in 2 week suspension, I'm at home on a year suspension, all over my natural hair. So this legislation is really needed, and I'm calling on everyone in the House. I'm calling on the chairman to assign a hearing date for this bill and all other 5 versions of the bill so that it can be heard. We need it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dakari. I would also like to give Dr. Boyce a chance to say a few words, and then Haley, and then we'll close. They've come a long way for today, and I do believe that we deserve this moment, and without a hearing, this is our moment, so thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative Bowers, and all the co-authors, all the supporters of the bill. We're here today for Crown Capital Day because we have been tracking the bill, we have set alerts for the bill has sat and gone nowhere. And so we're here today to visit with representatives, to tell them why it matters, to hear the stories of people being affected in the workplace. We're here with a message that's simple. We deserve the right to show up in the full authenticity of who we are, even if that is contrary to what you understand to be necessary. It's just true that we can show up fully unassimilated and fully authentic every single day and do a great job at school, do a wonderful job at work, and our professionalism is not determined by the hairstyle that we wear on our head. And so, again, thank you. I won't take up too much time. Y'all have all beautifully laid out the case for why the bill is important. I'm just here to say that we're here today to ask, to share the stories, to tell people that are otherwise turning a blind eye to look, to listen, to hear, and to act, so that we can protect not only students in schools, which is of the utmost importance, but also for people in the workplace and for the future of our state, to send a message to students that aren't in schools yet, to my daughter that's 2 years old, that you can show up and your character is going to be judged, not what you look like. And so thank y'all again for being here.
And now I'll call Haley Taylor Slits. Miss Tarrant County.
Yes. Good morning. Hello. My name is Haley Taylor Schlitz. I'm Miss Tarrant County's outstanding teen. I'm 18 years old and I'm a rising third-year law student at Southern Methodist University Dedman School of Law. I am honored to be here today to support these pieces of legislation. Generation Z is the most diverse generation that our nation and this state has ever seen, and we are the generation that's directly impacted by these bills. I know we have all seen stories in the media of the students who are discriminated against for wearing their hair in natural styles. And I know that every Black girl in the nation has an experience where they were told to either straighten their hair, cut their hair, tame their hair, lay their hair down. And it's unacceptable. I think we can all agree that this is no way to encourage a productive learning environment. If the legislature can take actions to support our students, and if I can take actions to support my generation, you should, and I will. The legislature can take these actions, and Generation Z implores the legislature to do so by giving these bills an opportunity for a hearing and a vote. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Haley. And thank you all again for joining us. And I hope you understand how important this legislation is to us and to many more people. I want to say thank you to the Honorable Aisha Davis, to Dr. Boyce, to State Representative Jasmine Crockett, to Dakari Davis, Haley Taylor Schlitz, and to Hope Cozart for standing up for, as parents, we have to be advocates for our children. And Hope, you and your husband are just two of the many parents who are seeing their children miss out on opportunities because of how their hair grows out of their heads. And Dakari, your story blows me away. And the fact that you said to me last night, so you could take care of your family, you cut your dreads. To keep your job and a roof over your head. I believe how the hair naturally grows out of my head should have nothing to do with what is inside it, and therefore the success that I accomplished. The Crown Act has already passed in 9 states. 1 state passed a bill inspired by it, and several bills have been called and filed in states in every part of the country. The time is now for Texas to take up the civil rights legislation and protect people from racial discrimination. We now have one of our joint authors, Representative Reynolds, that has joined us. I also want to say, before I let Vice Chair Reynolds say a few words, if you will, that the entire Texas Legislative Black Caucus has supported House Bill 392 and Senate Bill 77. Thank you.
Good morning. I apologize for being late. I want to commend my colleague for her tireless work. Representative Bowers has been a real champion for the Crown Act. In fact, I recall when a young man, DeAndre Arnold, reached out to me from the Barbers Hill High School. One of the first persons I talked to was Representative Bowers, and also Representative Carl Sherman, who's here. And we came together collectively. The Texas Legislative Black Caucus came together, and we galvanized, and we came together at Texas Southern University to really talk about our stance against hair discrimination in this state. And we've been working tirelessly ever since, but I just want to publicly commend you for your diligence, for your perseverance, for bringing stakeholders together, for working with the National Crown Coalition. And here we are today. And I believe, there she is, our chair, Nicole Collier, the chair of the Texas Legislative Black Caucus. We have made it very clear that this is one of our top legislative priorities. We want to make sure that Texas moves in the right direction. There are many things that, for example, students should be focused on, but their hair shouldn't be one of them. And I believe that the time is right to change this law in Texas, and I believe that Representative Bowers has an excellent bill that has bipartisan support. So there is no reason why we cannot advance this bill and pass this bill this session. Texas is unique in that we only meet every 2 years. Every 2 years. So if we don't get it done during the 87th legislative session, then we have to wait 2 years down the road unless Governor Abbott adds this to the call of a special session. That's very unlikely. So the time is now, and I want to thank all of the stakeholders that have traveled and traversed this state to assemble here on your Texas State Capitol to demand that this law changes this session. We can't kick this can down the road. The time to act is now. In this age of social justice, there is a consciousness that has been that we're all here today to stand on the right side of history to say Texas is time to come into compliance like other states have and pass the Crown Act today. So thank you, Representative Bowers. Thank you, Representative Sherman, all the other joint authors that have authored this legislation, all the co-authors. I know all the Texas Legislative Black Caucus have signed on to this piece of legislation, and we're all standing in solidarity, asking for a hearing in the State Affairs Committee, and that bill be voted out so it can get on the floor and we can get it over to the Senate. Thank you.
Chair, call you, would you like to say? You did everything. Okay, thank you. And thank you again, as Representative Reynolds said, for the other members of the Texas Legislative Black Caucus. We have Vice Chair Barbara Gervin-Hawkins as well here with us. And we'd like to open it up for a couple of questions. We don't have much time, and we do have to release the room. So if there are any questions, we'll take them now. Yes?
Hi, my husband, AP. I think, like, a lot of times we're talking about this, but we've left this open so much to interpretation, whether it's by our schools or our jobs. Why is it hurtful to leave this open to interpretation? I know you've touched on it briefly, but when people that don't experience, like, natural hair have to write legislation, why is that hurtful?
Why is it? Give me the question.
Why is it hurtful for, people that don't have natural hair to be writing policies for kids like you?
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for that question. When we started this process, we knew that it would be a lot of education and awareness that we had to bring to light, and we are still within that process. And I do believe, with my own personal journey, and many of us standing here have our own story, that it is necessary that we are at the table when these decisions are made, when these policies are written, because we have these experiences, whether they're our own or within our families.
Can I add to that?
Yes?
That's a great question. And I think that one of the concerns that we have is that it's been so subjective.
Yes.
For so long, African Americans have had to conform to society. Our hair tends to be naturally curly, but yet in order to make other people feel comfortable, we straighten our hair. Why do we have to do that? We are comfortable the way we are, and so we should be entitled to. We should not be judged. We should not be looked upon poorly because we decide to wear our hair in the natural state. This goes back to the slavery days when we had to try to conform to meet with what other people felt was acceptable. We are accepting ourselves, and that's what this bill is doing. We say we love ourselves, we love our skin color, and we love our hair. And so it's just like also in the 60s. You remember in the 60s where people had long hair and that was frowned upon, especially with men, frowned upon, but then that's their choice, that's their prerogative. And the same thing with our hair. If we decide that we want to have our hair natural, then that's our prerogative, and we should have that right. We should have that protected right, and it should not be used to penalize us or to harm us, and especially with our black men who already struggle to try to make ends meet and to get ahead. This should be not another form of disenfranchisement used against them. And so that's why we're standing here today, to say we're taking that away. We're going to take away that option because obviously you can't be trusted with it. And we need to do it at the state level to make sure that we have uniform model policy that sets it very clear that I can wear my hair the way I want to and not be penalized.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Collier. And I want to clarify that this is not about length. It is about protective styles and texture. So we want to make sure that that is clear because there's a lot of confusion when it comes to length of hair and at the shoulder.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm so sorry, yeah.
No, I just want to make sure that's clear because we have that all the time.
Okay.
Barbara Gervin Hawkins, Representative.
Thank you, and thank you. And again, that was a great question. I think that is the question. One of the things that we have to be mindful of, particularly with our children, as an educator, a previous educator, pride, confidence, and all of that plays a role in growth. And so if you always feel you're inferior, what happens to you in any setting, be it school and or a job? So we've got to look at the statistics that shows African American children don't perform well in school. Well, it's some of the issue dealing with the lack of confidence, and pride in terms of who you are. So the Crown Act represents something more than just a hairdo, okay? It represents a mentality. It represents a sense of pride to be able to be creative. You look at all the African American folks in this room, our hair is different. Let's celebrate that. Let's not make that a bad thing. And I think that's so important for our children, and moving forward with the greater society can accept the fact we're black and we're proud and we're beautiful. And we want to continue to promote that with our children so they can have the level of confidence they need to be successful. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Yes, ma'am.
I do have one follow-up question, and it's from my school. Earlier, and correct me if I'm wrong, your husband's a veteran. You guys have tried working with the school, but now it's gotten to the point where he's not even allowed on the campus. Is that true?
No, sorry, that was misreported. He is allowed on the campus, but they are intimidated by him because he's very large and very passionate when he speaks. So they've told him that they would call the cops, if he got loud. So he's just a passionate person, though.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming, and thank you all for.
Can you just maybe you could address it some? You talk a little bit more about what the long effects are of having a student have to sit by themselves in a cubicle just because of their hair, miss out on class time. I mean, can we talk about how damaging, how difficult that can be in the long run?
I mean,
just from an education standpoint.
okay. So, and I will touch on that for you, but I do believe that it is very much detrimental to a person's mental state. They're held in isolation. They're kept from future success, to be honest with you. They're kept from the classroom, from learning day to day, from the social interaction with their friends. And once their friends find out why, then it can turn into bullying. There are all sorts of things and consequences that can take place and happen once this type of isolation happens. In the case of Dakari Davis, who is here, he cut his hair to keep his job, to feed his family, to keep a roof over his head. So you think about, he's a grown man. You think about a child who is kept not only from prom and graduation, the things that are celebratory in your senior year, as DeAndre Arnold, as Representative Reynolds talked about. So it is very detrimental to their psyche and well-being. Any further questions? I think we do need to wrap up, but I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank you all for being here today in support of the Texas Crown Act. I want to say that we are not stopping here. This is the beginning of a movement here in Texas. Today is our moment to go and talk to lobby legislators to make sure that we get a hearing, but we have to keep the Crown Act in Texas alive and well and moving. I do believe that we will have our day, we will be heard, and I do believe that Texas will be on the list as passing the Crown Act. So thank you very much for your time.
And for anybody who's here for the NAACP press conference, we're about to start that momentarily.